Kidnapped.
The door creaked open, and moonlight flooded the room. The cold wind rushed in, and Rahul could feel the excitement. He greedily read every word as his eyes rushed from one end of the line to the other, up the page and down. Such thrillers excited him, and like any other 10-year-old, he loved to read the kind of books that left him wondering what was going to happen next. "Rahul, is that the light in your room?" That was his father's voice booming from the ground floor of the house. Rahul Bajaj lived in a 2-story house on Pali Hill. His father was a successful businessman, and of course, Rahul had all that he could wish for. "Light, Papa? What light? In my room?" Rahul shouted back, quickly switching off the light. If there was anyone that he was afraid of, it was his father. He continued to read with a torchlight under his bedsheet. "Why doesn't anything as exciting happen to me?" he wondered. And then it happened. The window opened slowly from the outside, and a pair of thin, long legs stepped into the room. Within a minute, there was another pair of legs. This one was short and fat. Rahul switched off the torchlight and held his breath. He had a feeling that something was about to happen to him. He waited. A thin man with curly hair and a chubby man with thin hair were approaching him. They were moving slowly towards him with a sack in hand. As he saw the men come towards him, Rahul whispered, "That's not necessary. I'll just go along with you quietly. I'm interested in adventure. I'll make it easy for you." The two men looked at each other in surprise. This was easier than they thought. "Where do we take you?" Laurel asked. "You mean you do not have a plan? Don't you read books? Don't you know you have to have a plan?" Rahul whispered angrily and loudly. He was getting very impatient and angry with the kidnappers. He had to do everything. "We have a cottage by the lake, about 100 kilometers from here. Let's go there for a start." It took them 2 hours to reach the cottage. The lake glistened in the moonlight. Perfect, thought Rahul. Then he heard the distant cry of a wolf. "Yes," he said excitedly. Things could not get better. This sort of thing always happened in the books and movies he saw. But they were getting worse for Laurel and Hardy. Something is wrong here, they suspected. Kids don't volunteer to get kidnapped. They did not feel in charge. They were right. "Hey, you fat one, Hardy, come here. Go find some wood and make a campfire. Laurel, you go pitch a tent. I'm sure you'll find one in the cottage. We come here during our vacation." Laurel and Hardy looked at each other. Laurel said, "Stop calling us Laurel and Hardy. Do you think we're cartoon characters? Take this seriously. We will kill you. If you don't listen to me, I'll just walk back home and tell my father that you kidnapped me," replied Rahul, not in the least frightened. The two men decided to cooperate. They were looking for some ransom money, and if they lost the kid, they were never going to get rich. So Rahul sat and threw pebbles into the lake as the tent was being pitched. "Ah, this kid is annoying. Why haven't his parents complained to the police yet?" The kidnappers wondered as they paced up and down under the sun the next afternoon. Breakfast was not easy to arrange for a kid who thought he was a king. The only question going through their minds after that was, what would he want for lunch? But for Rahul, the day was just better than any other day. He was quite delighted that he was to miss school. The thin one went into town to check whether there was any news item about the missing rich boy. No news, neither in the newspaper nor on TV. This is getting very dangerous, they thought. How much more could they tolerate this kid? Let's call his father and ask for some ransom money at least. They called the Bajaj residence. Mr. Bajaj answered the call himself. "We have your son. If you want him back, arrange for 1 crore rupees immediately," said Hardy, trying to sound very dangerous. "Ah, you have my son, do you? I wondered where he went off. Thought he was spending the night at his friend's place. Ransom? 1 crore? Let's see. Is Rahul enjoying the kidnapping, sir? He always hoped something like this would happen to him, you know. How much are you willing to give me to take him back? Rahul will not want to come back. Best of luck. Let me know when the money is ready. And the phone went dead. Mr. Bajaj knew his son would look after himself, but he hurriedly picked up the receiver again to call the police. What do you think happened to Rahul? Simple. The kidnappers tied him up in a sack and dropped off the bundle at the doorstep of his residence. They heaved a sigh of relief. Kidnapped. Rahul was a 10-year-old boy who loved reading thrillers. His father's voice came booming from the ground floor of the house, whether the light is on in his room. Rahul quickly switched off the light. He continued to read with the torchlight under his bedsheet. The window opened slowly from the outside, and a pair of thin, long legs stepped into the room. Within a minute, there was another pair of legs. This one was short and fat. Rahul switched off the torchlight and held his breath. He had a feeling that something was about to happen to him. He waited. They were moving slowly towards him with a sack in hand. Rahul whispered that he will just go along with them quietly as he was interested in adventure. He will make it easy for them. When Rahul came to know that his kidnappers had no plan, he suggested them a cottage by the lake about 100 kilometers from the house where they could take him. It took them 2 hours to reach the cottage. They suspected that something was wrong. Kids don't volunteer to get kidnapped. They did not feel in charge. They were right. Rahul asked Hardy to find some wood and make a campfire, and to Laurel, he asked him to pitch a tent. One of the kidnappers asked Rahul to stop calling them Laurel and Hardy. Rahul replied that if they don't listen to him, he will just walk back home and tell his father that they kidnapped him. The two men decided to cooperate. The kidnappers found the kid annoying. They wondered as to why haven't his parents complained to the police yet. But for Rahul, the day was just better than any other day. He was quite delighted that he was to miss school. The thin one went into town to check whether there was any news item about the missing rich boy. No news, neither in the newspaper nor on TV. They called up Mr. Bajaj. Hardy told him that they had their son and to arrange for 1 crore rupees immediately if he wanted him back. Mr. Bajaj asked him whether Rahul was enjoying the kidnapping because he always hoped something like that would happen to him. Mr. Bajaj knew his son would look after himself, but he hurriedly picked up the receiver again to call the police. The kidnappers tied him up in a sack and dropped off the bundle at the doorstep of his residence.